Welcome to In the News for April the 11th, 2025. I am Brett Burney from appsandlaw.com.
And this is Jeff Richardson from iPhone JD. Hey, Brett, we're no longer in Chicago together, huh?
We're not in Chicago anymore. I'm kind of disappointed. I mean, we had such a great time last week. It was great to see you and to interact with you. And then we recorded our podcast last Friday in the exhibit hall of the ABA Tech Show conference. And that was fun. We had special guests. We had puppies. That was great. But now we're kind of back to our own haunts. Well, you're back home. I'm in Texas visiting family, which has been great. But boy, the news has not stopped.
Oh my
We're
goodness.
going to even go to like a higher level of news today. We are not political commentators. We never should be. But I feel like this week is where some of the technology issues and gadgets that we hold so dear, Jeff, have collided with some politics in there. So we really can't avoid it too much, but at least let's maybe walk through some folks about some of the things that have been going on, starting with apparently an airlift of millions of phones, maybe not that many, from China to India, maybe to avoid some tariffs.
Yeah, I mean, Apple is smart. Apple's CEO, Tim Cook, before he was the CEO, was the person that was in charge of basically, making sure that the iPhones got made correctly, that, he was the founder of the just in time, get parts exactly when you need them so that you could use them when you need them and all that sort of stuff. Well, they've had to put those traditional things that have made Apple so successful on the side burner because of the uncertainty that, I mean, the entire market's facing it, obviously, but I think that Apple's particularly prone to it because, so much of their stuff is made specifically in China, but also elsewhere. And so the reports were that Apple had airlifted, what is it? This is just from India. They had
600 tons of iPhones.
600 tons. And when you see that number at first, you're like, oh my goodness, that sounds like that is tons of iPhones. But as this one report that we had in here said, that's, it maybe is not even 2 weeks of iPhones, especially since so many people have been purchasing iPhones and other Apple products lately because of the legitimate fears that the prices are about to go way, way up. So, nobody knows what's going to happen. Apple is, on the one hand, they do have some margins on these iPhones. They could cut into that a little bit, perhaps, but, they're obviously not going to want to do that too much. I mean, I think it's inevitable that unless things change, and of course, the irony is that things are changing every hour right now, but unless we could somehow go back to sanity again, it's, iPhones are going to be a lot more expensive because so many of them are made in China. So it's just, it's a crazy situation.
This story that you linked to, they really did the calculations here. Where were they saying the package weight of an iPhone 14? They said 350 grams. So 600 tons would be about 1.5 million iPhones. If you after accounting for a little bit of packaging and weight. And I like this. You linked to another story from John Gruber, Daring Fireball. One of those questions like, how many new iPhones can fit on a freight plane? And that's where he's saying, talking about that he goes, it's a whopping 12 days of sales at most. So when that's done, what are we going to do at that point? And, obviously, depending on which side of the spectrum that you kind of fall on, there's a lot of different options and I think comments that people have made on this. But at the bottom line, it's going to affect it somehow, some way.
If there is logic to this, and there's not, but if there was, the idea is, well, let's, make America great again because we're going to have everything manufactured in the United States. But the problem is you can't just flip a switch and say start to make iPhones in the United States. We don't have the manufacturing capability. We don't have the people trained. I mean, you literally could not do this. And Apple has tried. In history, Apple way back when tried. They tried to make the Mac in the United States. When Steve Jobs was in charge of Next, they tried to make those in the United States. Apple has opened up a plant in Austin to try to do just a very, limited run of the Mac Pros and stuff like that. They've done it, but we just don't have the resources. We don't have the training. We don't have the workforce. Now, give us 10 years. And, if the government wants to put money into encouraging people to learn these skills and to establish centers, I mean, the thing about China is that all the industries that you need are right there in the same city. So you can move the parts from one, we don't have that in America. So yeah, you could, give it 10 years. And we could eventually get there. But of course, the irony is that these jobs, and again, nobody should have a bad job, but I mean, these jobs, they're very difficult jobs using your hands and these parts. A lot of Americans are not going to want these jobs. And so I think the whole thing's a pipe dream. It's never going to happen. And so, but since sanity is not apparently important right now, this is what's going to happen, and the prices are going to go up. And I don't even know if you noticed this, Brett, but I dropped into the show notes just as we started to record. Anchor is
Yes.
another company that we know very well. They make
Uh-huh.
very great products. Anchor is made in China, and Anchor has some sub companies like Eufy and stuff like that. And I'm literally have next to me right now this Anchor charger, which I've been such a big fan of because
Which saved us
we
last
we
week.
used it
I
when we
like it.
recorded last week. It's got tons of battery power. It's got the cord on the side, so you can just plug right in. It's got another one, over here. This thing's great. This is an Anchor product that you could get for as low as $88, $89 on Amazon. Not anymore.
Mm-hmm.
All the prices are going up. Just before we started
Yuck.
recording, it was up to 110, and it might be going up even more. And that's this one. I have another Anchor product in front of me. That's my 3-in-1 holder, cords. And this is just one example. So much of what we buy, especially in the electronic space, which is sort of what we're talking about
Yeah.
here, it's coming from China, or it's coming from other countries that may not have as big of tariffs for now, although that could change by the time we finish recording this podcast. It's just crazy. And so that it's going to have all these
Yeah.
spillover effects, right? People, notwithstanding the fact that last weekend a bunch of people were rushing to buy iPhones. If prices go up, it's going to have spillover effects. People are going to delay purchases. What is Apple going to do when they come out with the new models this fall? Are they going to have to raise the prices? Are people going to put off
Mm-hmm.
purchases? Is that going to have side-off effects? And there's all these effects. Again, I'm not an economist, but it doesn't take anyone to look at the state of the economy today. And I'm trying not to look at my 401k right now because it's not very happy.
Yeah.
It's
Same.
a mess of a situation. And I don't know what the result is going to be. So, maybe wouldn't it be nice if in 2 weeks everybody could sort of shake hands and say, okay, let's just go back to the way things were.
Right.
But until that happens,
Mm.
I'm glad. I mean, we're not being paid the big bucks at Apple right now, but there are very smart people at Apple that I'm sure are just pulling their hair out trying to decide what to do because you can't account for uncertainty. And I don't understand how anybody thinks, no matter what part of the political spectrum that you're on,
Right.
that
Right.
uncertainty is good for the economy or just for our subsection, of Apple mobile products and stuff like that. So it's a mess, and it's a big story, and you can't avoid it. So we'll see where we are next
But
week.
what a creative approach here. Like, let's just load a bunch into a freight plane
I guess
and
it's the
send
best
it
they
over
could
to a
do at the
different
last minute.
country. I
Yeah,
feel like it's
yeah,
like a Mission Impossible storyline or something like that. It's Tom Cruise is probably flying the plane at some point, and they're
yeah.
just crazy stuff
I mean,
on
just to
there. But
talk about that, there's a shell game, Brett, that one of the things that they've speculated is
yeah, that's what. Yeah.
iPhones are made around the world, right? So like there are iPhones made in Brazil for the Brazilian market, but they've even said that,
Uh-huh.
maybe what they'll do is if the tariffs in Brazil are lower, maybe the Brazilian iPhones will go to the US and the Chinese iPhones will go
That's
to Brazil, which seems
right.
backwards. But maybe that's and not that that would solve it, but it would at least ameliorate some of the cost. The price increase wouldn't be quite as much. It's crazy,
Right.
crazy. Mm,
Yeah, this is good. Like that's some of what you're talking about. What Dan's Jason Snell talked about here in the
hmm
Macworld column is that playing a shell game on some of this. Whew, interesting stuff. Okay, how about another little bit of an angle on the
hmm
political aspect? But we'll talk about the iPhone component of this. This
Right,
was
right,
several
right.
weeks ago. We never talked about this, but this was the I forget his name. It was a signal
Mike
group. Oh,
Waltz with
National
yeah.
Security Advisor Mike Waltz, inadvertently, apparently, and I believe inadvertently. Uh, Automatically added the editor-in-chief of the Atlantic magazine to a very confidential and secure private group on a Signal app. They were communicating with various folks. You can probably do a better job
Yeah.
of explaining this. Most everybody has heard about this story and what happened, but we got a little bit more information as to how it happened. And this is what I was asking, of
Right.
course, because we're a little bit on the nerdy spectrum, right, Jeff? And it's like, I'm
hmm
like, okay, I know, I believe that he didn't actually purposely add Jeffrey Goldberg, the editor in chief of the Atlanta magazine. But then how did it
hmm
happen? Like there has to be some logic from the technical side. And this story you link to from TechCrunch at least explains a little bit of that, I think.
Yeah, so we've probably all seen before on your iPhone or your iPad is that it will see a contact, like maybe when you're looking at an email or something like that, and it will offer
Mm-hmm.
to update the contact automatically and that sort of stuff. And I do that, somewhat frequently, and it will
Sure.
pull someone's phone number off of the signature block or something like that. However, it's not perfect, right? And so in this case, there was a situation in the past where when Mike Waltz was looking at some emails, apparently there had been an email chain in which the journalist had been on it. Jeffrey Goldberg was on the chain, but it basically picked up his number and mistakenly said, "Do you want to add this
Oh,
to the contact entry for somebody else, Brian Hughes, who at the time was in the private sector, but now is a Trump spokesman?" So as a result, a while ago, who knows how long ago, he
I
had
see.
added the journalist phone number to somebody that's now working in the Trump administration. And so as a result, when he went to go add him to the Signal conversation, thinking he was just adding him at his regular phone number, little did he know that he wasn't adding that guy's phone number, but instead the journalist's phone number. And the next thing you know, the
Oof.
journalist is part of the conversation. Now, the thing is, Signal has some things that make it private so that you and I could have a private
Mm-hmm.
conversation, but you and
Right.
I are not discussing the military secrets of how do you bomb Yemen, and we're about to do so. Obviously, military secrets are not supposed to be discussed over consumer techniques, specifically because I've never been in the military, but I can only imagine that the tools that they use to communicate with each other don't interface with the iPhone and iPad such that auto
Right.
suggestion of emails would even be an issue. But when you take
Correct.
communications and you bring them, but there's a lesson for all of us here, even aside from whether or not they should not have been using Signal, which is obvious, but all of us have seen in the past and will see in the future, especially as AI becomes a more of a big thing, attempts from our devices to be helpful to us. And you just need to pause and watch it. Because if you accidentally add a phone number for one person to another person's contacts, any of us could easily get into a situation, whether you were using Signal or whether we're texting or something else, where you accidentally
Right.
think you're sending it to person A and instead you're sending it to person B. So that's the lesson here that I think that we can all take from it. It's interesting that
Like,
TechCrunch was able to
do
figure
you
that out.
think I'm I'm trying to figure this out. Was that just a message that popped up, Jeff? And like you would have just inadvertently like said yes or okay, just because
Yeah,
you want to like get
exactly.
past the dialogue
Yeah.
box. Okay, that's what I was thinking.
And he probably thought he was
Yeah.
doing the right thing. Oh, I'm adding his cell phone to his contact entry. That makes
Right.
perfect sense.
Right.
But he was adding somebody else's cell phone to the contact entry without realizing it. So,
I don't know why we've
mm.
taken this long to explain it from the technical side because Mike Waltz apparently had the best explanation of this. He said that Goldberg's number was sucked in from another contact.
In a way, he's right.
Why do we need to bother with the technical aspects? That's what happened. It was sucked in. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. Very good.
something definitely
Okay.
sucked here. No question about that.
Gotcha. All right. One more story that I feel like, has the potential to like, trample a little bit on some political areas, but there's several angles here, I think, from your aspect and my aspect that's a little troubling. Apparently,
Hmm.
there was a lawyer that was detained at the Detroit airport when he and his family were coming back from spring break, and he was detained. And really, the pieces that I got out of this was disturbing. That number one, the federal agents were asking for his iPhone. Apparently, that's what he had. Right, was an iPhone.
Hmm.
He didn't want to give it up. He didn't want the federal agents, to look in the phone because he's a lawyer. And so he's got many different clients that he's representing, no matter which client that they were looking for. And so that was a little nerve wracking. At some point, it looks like in this story that he did let them view the contact list of his phone, but he was pretty stringent about not allowing them just to take the phone and to take information, which, of course, again, he's a lawyer. He's got many people that he represents. And that just is a little nerve wracking for me to read this story, Jeff.
Yeah. This has been an issue. This predates the Trump administration, to be fair.
True,
U
true. You're
US
right.
US Customs for many years now has become very aggressive on,
Mm,
if we think that you're not the right person. I mean, again, I'm a white male. They're probably not going to stop me. But if there's something about the color of your skin or the cut of your jab or whatever it is that they don't think that they like, they will
hmm.
tuck you aside and they will demand, if you have a mobile device, I would like to see your mobile device and please unlock it for me so I can make a copy of it so that I can do whatever I want with it. And if you're a private citizen, you don't really have a lot of defenses to this, unfortunately. Now,
Mm.
and let me pause by saying that to the extent that I'm giving advice here, I don't know all the facts. And I've tried to research this. In fact, even before
True.
we recorded,
Yes.
I was looking for the latest reports on the EFF's website because the Electronic Frontier Foundation has been trying to offer some advice on this, but they don't really have good advice right now
Good.
either. But I can say this for the lawyers, or anyone else that has something that's particularly sensitive. If you're a doctor, I'm sure it's the same with HIPAA type situations. If Customs wants to access your device and they want to look at it, and you say no, they're going to take you aside to the interrogation room, just like did to this gentleman. And
Mm-hmm.
at it, there's a limit to what you can do. If you say that you're an attorney and you have confidential information on there, that you can't just expose it to a third party without violating the attorney-client privilege and work product doctrines and stuff, they are supposed to escalate it to the next level so that they would bring in someone that's more of an attorney as opposed to just, a routine agent that's working at the border. And you basically need to work it out, is how I understand it. And the way that this
Mm.
attorney, who he clearly had a sense that he was smart enough going into this that he knew a little bit about what his rights were, but also how far
Right.
he'd go. So he decided to cut this agreement of sharing his contacts. Now that makes me uncomfortable because I have a lot
Yeah.
of people that are in my contacts. First of all,
Right.
and again, I don't represent terrorists or anything else like that, but the simple fact that I represent certain people, that is confidential. And second of all, their contact
Correct.
information is, I don't know if it's privileged, but it's certainly not something that they would want to be shared with the world. And they would feel violated if I did so. So it's a very difficult situation. So he made the decision to give them contacts, and that was enough for them to let him go, and that's fine. But this has been a problem for a while of if you leave the country and you come back in, and if you do get stopped, what do
Mm.
you do? Now,
Yeah. Yeah.
we've talked years ago, Brett, that one thing you can do is if you don't want them to have access to your passwords, the 1Password app, and perhaps some of its competitors have this as well, but 1Password actually has a function that you can basically, click a button and it erases all the passwords from your phone completely. And then after you come through customs, because they're stored
Right.
securely on the 1Password website server, they can then download it. But during that period of time that you're in customs, you literally had, even if you unlocked 1Password, there's literally no passwords in there, or you can have an exception, like just these three
Right.
entries are there and nothing else. So that's like a little thing that you can do just on passwords to try to stop them from doing that. But keep in mind that what they want to do is they want to take your phone, they put it through one of those machines that copies all of it, and then they decide later, they can take their time reading through your emails, reading through your text
Sure.
messages, your contacts and stuff. So you just need to decide what you're going to do in that situation. And so now what's troubling now is, again, because of current policies, all this attorney did was represent somebody who had been arrested, which is something that attorneys
Yeah.
do all the time. Somebody was
Yeah.
protesting on a college campus and got arrested, so they wanted an attorney. He represented
Correct.
them and gave some advice. And I guess the fact that he represented somebody put him on the government's list of bad people, which is, as an attorney, it just turns my stomach that that's true. But so
Right.
now we have to be careful who represent. And he figured out what was going on, and so this can happen. I mean, I'm thinking through my head right now, Brett. I don't think I have represented people that have been protesters. I'd have to think about that though. I mean, it's not really my area of business, but if you're like a
Right.
solo attorney that has more of a, practice where you take in whatever people come into you, I mean, of course you're going to represent people that are arrested. I mean, DWI attorneys, everybody they've represented
Right.
is, but those sorts of things. And so for certain types of practice, and you know who you are if you're listening to this, you know,
Right.
just be creative and think about whether you might end up on one of these lists. And even if you don't think you will, I encourage people to think through this so that should it happen to you if you leave the country and you come back, at least you've thought about what are my options? What do I think is right for me? I wish I could say this is the Jeff Richardson advice on what to do. I don't know. I really don't know.
Right.
But the
Right.
next time I travel internationally, I'm going to have a very, especially if it's during the next 4 years, I'm going to have a very, I'm going to have to think about it so that I have a plan. It's a tough situation.
Can I just ask real quick? And again, this is not legal advice from either of us, but
Hmm.
Jeff, there was once upon a time that I remember there seemed like there were some cases that um you don't have a right to privacy, and this is a little bit different. You don't have a right to privacy for like your thumbprint or your face ID. So one of the things
Correct.
that I always tell people is make sure that like if you're getting your phone out of your pocket, like you click the side button 5 times really quickly, and then that will require you to use a passcode. Because I do remember there have at least been some case, and I don't know the
Hmm.
current case law on this, that they can't force you to give up your passcode. Now, obviously, if you're sitting inside of an interrogation room with federal agents facing you, telling you that you must unlock this phone, that might have to
Hmm.
be a decision that you make on how far that you want to take that. But at least then they can't just hold the phone up to your face and unlock it if it's at least requiring a passcode. Now, that
Yeah.
wouldn't have, I don't think, have resolved the issue here. It just that goes through my head a lot of times on this because I just tell people, don't forget, especially if you're traveling, like maybe just turn off the Face ID or the
I think
Touch
that's a
ID if you're
simple
still
thing.
using that for at least
Yeah.
for now, because then they can't at least force it to some extent. Again, I'm not saying
Hmm.
that this is always going to be, but then you would have to at least put in that passcode. And at least some courts have ruled that you do have a right to privacy for some passcodes and passwords. They can't make that up. But your biometric features, you don't necessarily have that same right.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you mentioned that because that's exactly right. I mean, anytime you're going to go through a situation like this, where you're just afraid that somebody might, don't have to be crossing a border, just any situation, to
Right.
turn, I mean, the simple solution is to turn your iPhone off because Apple has protections in there so that when you first boot up an iPhone for sure, it's going to
Right.
absolutely require the passcode. You're not going to be able to break into it. But there are alternatives, like you said, like pressing the button enough times to get into that mode. But I mean, the way to do it that you're not going to be in a problem is just turn it off,
Yeah.
and then you can turn it
Right.
back on when you get to the other side.
Good point. Good
And so
point.
that is good advice that I do think is worth giving. Yeah.
Can we talk about something a little more fun now?
Oh,
Let's
please,
see.
please.
Okay, how about this? I mean, I think it's good that we needed to cover some of those things because they have been in the news. But here's a fun little story you linked to about 3 tips for using the app GoodNotes. Now, quickly, GoodNotes, I know, Jeff, is one of your favorite. You probably use this every day, if I could guess. This is
Every
your
day.
note-taking app of choice on the iPad. I tend to like Notability a little bit more, but I'm so glad that you posted this because no matter which one that you kind of use, and some others, I know Bill that we talked with last week, he still uses a Note Shelf, which is, wow, that's been around for a long time. But
Hmm.
today, most of the time, I recommend either GoodNotes or Notability as your note taking app for the iPad. And here's 3 nifty little tips if you do use GoodNotes.
What I liked about this article is even as someone who uses the app every day, these 3 tips are things that I either did not know about at all or really hadn't thought about. And now that I looked at them again, I'm like, well, maybe I want to use these. And so just to go through them quickly, if you haven't clicked on the link, the first one is called the tape tool, which is a little icon. It's
Yeah,
it's been
what
right
is
up there. I
that?
just haven't
That's
paid attention to it. But what it does is when you click on it, it then, as you move with your Apple Pencil or your finger, if you're not using the pencil, it
Oh,
creates,
look at that.
basically some tape. And it's just temporary. And imagine if you had like a post-it note that you can stick over something and you can write on it if you
Yeah,
want, or you can remove it. And why might you want to do it? I mean, they're giving you the example if you're trying to learn something, this is the old example that you're in school and like, you have one side of the flashcard and the other, and you don't want to see the answer when you look at the question.
right,
This is a way you can
right.
have it and you could cover it up and you could lift it again. And again, I don't know if it's something that I'm going to use very often. And maybe I'll
You
just
got to
use it
try
just to
it
have
now,
a cool
right?
piece of tape. So it's just a reminder that it's there. The second one is the timekeeper. Brett, I had completely forgotten that there is right. I mean, I don't know how I
Ooh,
missed it. It's right there on the toolbar. It looks like a clock. And if you tap it, it brings up a timer. And so if you're in a situation where you're talking or somebody else is, and you just want to watch the time, pick I want to count down 6 minutes. I want to count down 34 minutes, whatever it is. And it'll put this nice timer right there in front of you. So you don't have to switch to some other app or use a different device. It's just right there in front of you. I completely forgot it was there.
that's
And this
nice.
last one is a good one. It's a quick note. And I've had this before that sometimes you just want to jot something down super quick. I love
Right.
that good notes. You can have, notebooks for different cases or different subjects. I was at a CLE today before I came here and I was speaking and stuff, but I had a notebook for that CLE and I had all the notes I was taking were in there. But sometimes it
Nice.
doesn't need to be nice and neat. You just need to write something as fast as possible. And so as it points here, there's a quick note feature and there's 2 ways to do it. The slower way to do it is to click the plus button to create a new note and then select
Right.
quick note. And that'll bring you right there, but you don't have to
Okay.
create the cover for it. You don't choose a template. It's just a white sheet of
Oh,
paper and you
yeah.
start writing.
That's nice.
What's even faster is if you just double tap on that plus button, that will not only create the note, but it'll create a quick note. So it's the fastest way, in literally a fraction of a second, tap, tap, you have a white sheet of paper and you just
You're
start
there.
writing.
I love it.
And you can jot down the phone number or whatever it is, the room, whatever little bit of information you're trying to jot down as fast as possible, whether it's on your iPhone or your iPad or whatever, you use GoodNotes. So that's one of those tips that this one I did know about in the back of my head, but I'm so glad to be reminded of it because, it's one of those things that when you need it, you need it right away. So it's good to
Right.
remember that you can
Right.
do that. And of course, you can use the built-in Notes app to do things too. There's all sorts of things. But if you're in a situation where you want to use GoodNotes to sketch things out for some reason, good way to quickly get into a note. So those are awesome tips. I like them.
Let's do a where you at segment. We
Where
don't
you
do
at?
these quite as often, I feel like. Now, we've heard and reported on the Apple Watch saving people from AFib with the heart issues or heart palpitations. But oh my goodness, I did not think the Apple Watch could help save someone's life or at least alert them to blood cancer. This was
Hmm.
amazing.
I've been using this is part of the Vitals app, right? And I've been using the Vitals app, which is, use it with the Apple Watch and stuff like that. And so far, it really hasn't told me anything interesting, but whatever, it's tracking me. Who knows? But what it did for this woman is it told her that her resting heart rates, which for her had usually been about 55 beats per minute, had suddenly
Right.
increased into the 90s. And she has a background. She's a psychiatrist, but she has some medical training. And, we'd think she would know some of this stuff. And she's like, well, that's really weird. And when she got this alert, she talked to her husband and says, well, maybe we should go check it out. And it turned out that, what I expected the story to be is that she had like a heart condition or something. No, she
Right.
had cancer.
Exactly.
It was a rare form of cancer that was triggered. And
Oh
they
my
said that if
goodness.
you had not gotten in here immediately, you would have been a gone pecan. Now she's now going through chemotherapy and, she certainly has a rough road ahead of her. Nobody wants to have cancer, but like, the best thing is not to have cancer, but the second best thing is to get an early enough diagnosis that maybe you could start to do something about it. And so she said that it was a
Right.
lifesaver for her. And normally we don't hear about the Apple Watch doing something vis-a-vis cancer, but I guess this is an example, this
Right.
rare type of blood cancer where she was thrilled to get that early alert. So that was a
I
nice
like she
story to
says,
hear. Yeah, go ahead.
she said, hand on heart, if it wasn't for my smartwatch constantly nagging me, I wouldn't have even noticed something was wrong. That's really
Hmm.
cool. I'm just glad.
Yeah.
Another story, I remember reporting on this story when I looked at this link that you sent, Jeff. I don't remember
Hmm.
exactly how long ago. Well, is it like it was like apparently July
2024.
20, 2024?
Hmm.
It was somebody in Australia, a gentleman got pulled out into the surf in the
Hmm.
water, and he couldn't swim back. He didn't have his phone with him, but he did have his Apple Watch, and he actually called emergency services, who came and picked him up via helicopter, which was amazing. I remember
Yeah.
talking about that, and today your video, this is such a good story that Apple actually recreated it, I guess. I don't even know if
Hmm.
this is the actual gentleman in this video here, but they recreated Rick's rescue, that you can now watch it as it was recreated by Apple.
Yeah, I'm assuming it's the same person, but if it is, that's pretty traumatic for him to have to, albeit in a simulated
That's
environment,
what I was
relive it.
thinking.
But what is real is the noise, the sound portion of this video is from his actual I say 911
Yeah.
call. I don't know if the numbers are 911 in Australia or if they're different numbers, but whatever. It's his emergency SOS call from his Apple Watch to the authorities. And the thing about this guy is, he explained that, he's 49 years old, he's in good health. He likes to body surf. He knows what he's doing. And he was smart enough that as he could feel himself getting swept out, he knew things like don't panic, don't lose your cool, preserve, he knew what to do. And yet at the same time, he could see himself getting pulled further and further and
Mm-hmm.
further away. And his wife,
Scary.
who had been on the beach with him, had gone off to do something else, so she wasn't there to see him go away. And he's like, what am I going to do? And then he, like you said, Brett, he realizes, wait a minute, I've got a cellular Apple Watch. And so he was able to trigger it and get to emergency help. And what the video that Apple shared doesn't relate, but the stories that were written at the time do, is that he was actually on the phone. I say on the phone, on the watch, on the phone for an
Right.
hour. So, he's in the middle
Oh,
of
really?
nowhere. There's,
Wow.
these violent waters around him. He's trying to tread water and keep alive and keep his wits about him. And for an hour, he had to talk to the emergency services. They had to figure out where he was. He didn't really have I mean, he could tell them where he started, but he wasn't sure how
Yeah.
far he had been swept away. And then eventually they were able to get the helicopter to him and save him. So, a desperate
Amazing.
situation, but nice to have. And that's the thing, I have the cellular version of the Apple Watch and I don't use it very often. Sometimes I might go out for, a jog outside and I don't want to take my iPhone with me. And it's nice to just have the Apple Watch and listen to something on there. And, if I needed to get in touch with somebody, I could, but it's not often. But part of the reason that I keep the cellular thing, it's just a sort of a protective thing.
Oh
just
yeah.
in case I ever need it. My son has an Apple Watch and he doesn't have it. But my daughter does because she does a lot of traveling because she's on basketball team and stuff like that. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
if your iPhone's dead or something like that,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
happens
Just
because,
in case.
teenagers and iPhones. This is the backup. She has the Apple Watch. She could get in touch with us if she needs to. It's got the cellular. I figured it was worth it. So stories like this, I mean, again, we know that they're great promotional pieces for Apple. They want people to get an Apple Watch and pay for the cell service and everything else. But this guy is certainly happy that he did it because he would have been, and this is another story of someone that literally would be dead, but for the Apple Watch. So my goodness.
I hope they gave him a free additional Apple Watch. If they did have to put it back in the water, like you said, how traumatic that would be. In the Vision,
And
let's
the
talk about the
vision.
Apple Vision. And the reason that I would like to talk about the Vision Pro is because my good friend Jeff Richardson, that I saw last week, allowed me for the first time to put on a Vision Pro. And I think it was maybe an hour and a half later that I took it off. Jeff, I am so thankful, and I had so much fun going through all of the content. And we could talk a little bit more about this, but the reason that we're bringing it up on this is because I believe, were using the guest user mode for the
Yes.
Vision Pro on your iPad, or maybe you're on your iPhone at first. I couldn't really see all the
Yeah,
way
I was
through.
actually using it on my
I
iPhone.
Okay,
So
okay.
this is it right
You were
here. And
watching.
so, yeah,
And you were
it's really
able to
nice.
direct me around. Like you could
Yeah.
almost see a lot of what I was seeing in the Vision Pro so that you could tell me like where to pinch and where to pull and all this other stuff. That was just, I mean, we can get to some of the content in a moment, but just the
Mhm.
ability for you to like walk me through and direct me was so cool. I mean, it was just that made it so much easier. And frankly, you only had to do it for a little bit, right? Because again, just like anything else, it was sort of intuitive in the way that it worked out. But just having you guide me through was great.
Yeah, and it's really nice. And I thought it would be better to do it on the iPad because it's a bigger screen. But the way that this app works is you can only have one connected at a time. So it's either your iPhone connected or your iPad. And I just happen to have my
Okay,
iPhone connected,
gotcha.
but it actually worked fine. I mean, on my iPhone screen, I mean, all I really needed to see was like, okay, I can see what you're doing now. Here's the apps. And I
Right.
could tell you something like swipe from the left to the right. And and this gets in, so it works really well, and it's so much better than it used to be before. So this is a great way to guide it. Now, there's still an issue that when you're watching a video with copy protection, which is just about all of the videos, it won't show it on the Vision Pro if
Yeah.
you're connected because it doesn't want you to be able to like screen, record the screen, which I don't even understand because who's going to record the screen of an
Uh,
iPhone? It's not going to be high
well,
quality. But
yeah.
anyway, regardless. So I knew that going in. So every time that you were about to start a video, I just disconnected my phone. But in the old days, if I had done that,
Okay.
I was forever gone. And then whenever you were done with the video and I could see that you were like looking around again, I could just
Right.
reconnect it.
Right.
And in fact, when I did that, I don't think it even told you. I mean, you tell me if that I was disconnecting or connecting. I don't know if you saw any alerts on that. You may have seen like a green
No.
dot at the very top.
No.
But so I
It's
was able to
seamless.
sort of guide you through the process. And it works really well. So if you have a friend that has a Vision Pro, once they've updated to the new system,
They
it's
can
easier
guide
for
you
them to
through.
share it with you. So then to the next point, it was fun for me because the Vision Pro has been out for, just about a year now, but it was the first time that you had used it, Brett. And I know that you're more of a
Yes.
tech savvy person, but the first thing I'm going to say is I could tell from watching you that the interface, even though it was a completely different interface, you've never used that type of interface before with your eyes and pinching your fingers and stuff like
Yeah.
that. I
Yeah.
mean, I think it seemed to me that it took you about 30 seconds to figure it out.
Yeah, at most. And again, some of that was because, we've talked about this quite a bit and I sort of kind
Yeah.
of knew, how to react. And then you guided me, through the first, or I would ask a question and you would immediately be able to answer. Like you look at it and you pinch or something like that. But yeah,
Hmm.
within just a few seconds, truly, I felt very comfortable walking over like, okay, oh, I can see how that works. And then, I remember one of the things that you had to walk me through was like flipping my hand over, to be able to like
Right.
to do that one action. And I
Hmm.
don't know that I would have known that if you hadn't explained that to me. But once you did, it was like, oh, well, of course, like that makes complete
Yeah.
sense on some of that. And that was
Yeah.
just great. And then the content. Jeff, it's like all of these weeks that you and I have been talking about this, and I keep saying Jeff would like to have more immersive content. I am on that bandwagon with you, my friend.
Now you
It
understand
was
why. Yeah.
That was so amazing. And Frank, again, I know we were together for like an hour and a half, and me just, with you just watching me walk around everything. I didn't even watch, all of it, but I wanted to do like, I know that high wire thing, which was just amazing. I mean, I truly felt more than I've ever have before. Like I was sitting on the edge of a cliff. I could look down, I could look around. I remember the other thing that was even before we get to like the actual content, your panorama pictures that you had taken, Jeff.
Yes.
That was incredible because I think I have stood on St. Charles Avenue, a couple of places where you had taken those pictures. And, I always tell people like when look at a panorama picture on an iPhone, a flat 2D interface, it almost looks like it's, what do you call it? It's not concave, but it looks like it's the opposite of that, like
Yeah.
it's
It's not
bent
quite right.
backwards on
Yeah.
itself. But when you look at that on the Vision Pro, I could look to my left, I could look 180 degrees, look to my right. It was
Hmm.
amazing that how much that I could see in that panoramic picture there. And you had mentioned that many times, but boy,
Yeah.
until you actually experience it, that was even before we get into like the video content, just
Hmm.
the panorama pictures, amazing.
And just to pause on that, I have had panoramic photos that I have, stitched together for over the years, but I never
Right.
really understood for decades now why I was doing it. I mean, for example, I remember in like 2005, 2006, I was at the old Yankee Stadium in New York and we had really good seats right behind home plate. And so I just used my camera at the time. This was before iPhone. It was just an SLR camera. I just like snap, snap, snap. I snapped like a whole bunch of pictures
Yeah.
and then I stitched them together in Photoshop. And the reason I did it was just to try to get the full view. But when you look at that same picture now in the Vision Pro, it's the way it's as if I'm standing there in the old Yankee Stadium, which doesn't even exist anymore. And you look left, you look right, and up and down. And even though it's a
Wow.
still picture, even though it's not a video, because you have the autonomy of looking whatever direction you want, essentially, except all the way up and down, it just brings new life. And so, like you say, just that one thing of that type of photo, when you have a device like
Incredible.
this, it's incredible. But anyway, uh, you were about to say, yeah, the
The
immersive
okay,
movies. I mean,
the highlining video, that was like one of the first that came out. Like you even have the date
yes.
here. This is such a great resource you put together on your site, all of Apple's immersive video content for the Apple Vision Pro. I wanted to start with that because that came out in February 2nd of 2024. It's a little over a year, but I remember that being the specific one that was there original. And it has dated it very well. I can't believe I can still close my eyes and see how close I was to what is her name, Faith Dickey, as she's going across,
Mhm.
and even my tummy feeling light as she's going across that high line. That was amazing just there. I did a little bit of the parkour, but I knew I wanted to get onto some other things. Where was the wildlife? The rhinos. Just I felt like they were coming into my chest when they walked up to me. There was the movie. What's that movie? The submarine movie. That Submerged. That was amazing because I wanted to see that because I remember Jason Snell and you and others had said like when they put that torpedo in, it feels like they are shoving it through your chest. And yes, I can concur. That is exactly what it felt like. But I think the thing that I enjoyed the most, I looked a little bit of Alicia Keys in her rehearsal room, the Metallica concert. Oh
Yeah.
my goodness. Like if that's the one that's the top of list that I would say I want to go and re-experience and rewatch again. I would do that again. It was just
Mhm.
so amazing to be so close to all of those performers, to see them up close and to hear, and there was like little stories. I didn't go through all of the little stories in there, but that was just amazing. That concert to me, like give us more of that kind of content. I guess it doesn't have to be. I think I like the movies and everything too, but just to watch that stadium and see the fans and interact and just the different angles, mind blowing for me.
Yeah, in fact, not only do you get to feel like you're sitting right there on stage next to the drums, so like this amazing seat that you could never afford, but when they put together that video, they even had the camera, and you skipped through it a little bit, but did you see the part where they were walking in through the crowds, up to the
Oh
stage?
yes.
And
Oh
so
yes.
you feel like
Oh
you're
yeah.
part of the band. I mean, I can only
Oh,
imagine this would be what it's like to be like, a fifth band member or something like that, that's just walking with the band, with the crowds next to you on both sides, you feeling the excitement, you're feeling the energy. I mean, immersive is what it's called. It's immersive video, but it is truly immersive. And I can only imagine that back in time when people said, "Oh my goodness, we're going from black and white television to color. Color is going to be so different. It changes everything to have color, and it changes everything to
Right.
have HD and all these other things." But this leap to immersive, it's like I don't even know what they could possibly have beyond this. Obviously, we want the devices to be smaller and stuff like that,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it is so close to feeling like you are 100% actually there. And in fact, that leads to I'll talk about it right now because one of the adventure ones that was there that I had a link to this today is
Hmm.
called Ice Dive. And what I thought was interesting is there was a podcast that I linked to where they were interviewing the person that was that had done this, and he got the world record for going underwater and swimming straight through these icy things without coming up for
Oh,
air.
yes.
But
Right.
what
Right.
he describes about it is like, this is something that he himself does, and he spends a lot of his own money to do it. But he says, when I try to describe to people what I'm doing, they can listen to the description and they can sort of try to imagine what it would be. He's like, but then if they put on an Apple Vision Pro and like they're underwater with me, or they're, because they, cameras were underwater, suddenly they now feel like I understand it. And that's the way that I feel. Every one of the things that's on this page, I feel like
Wow.
I have been a part of highlining because I can remember it. I was right there. I feel like I
That's
had
true.
these front stage seats for Metallica because I was there. And the one that you haven't talked about, Brett, but I think that you did look at some of these, although I forget which one. Sports. Sports is one of those
Oh,
things that
yes.
you just want to be there.
Yes.
And which
You're
I can't
right.
remember now. Which sports ones did you look at? Did you look
I
at the
did a little bit of the
soccer or the
soccer and
baseball?
then the
Oh,
the NBA. I did a little bit of
yeah.
the basketball too.
Yeah, I mean, it's like this is, and
Incredible.
I know we're not quite at the point where we can have live sports yet, but that's going to come eventually. I mean, nobody would want to watch a football game, a basketball game, a soccer game, anything else. If another way, if you had the option to be immersive, like you were just sitting there with the best seat in the house,
Right.
watching it, it's
Right.
right there in front of you. It's crisp. It's 100% realistic. So I'm thrilled that you got a chance to experience it because now you understand. And again, this is really only one part of the Vision Pro. I mean, this is just the entertainment part of it, which I totally
Right.
love. But what you
Oh,
didn't
yeah.
get a chance to try, Brett, is for example, hooking up your computer to it and having this huge
Oh,
monitor. That's
yeah.
something that you didn't get a chance to
I can't
try,
wait.
or any of the other things. So I know it's too expensive. I know, blah, blah, blah. It's too heavy, but it's going to get better over time. Let me end by saying one thing, because I did my presentation on it at one of my ABA Tech Show presentations on this.
Yes, you
We
did.
as lawyers are always trying to convince the jury, the judge, et cetera. And how are you persuasive? You're persuasive through your words, but you're also persuasive through the demonstrative exhibits that you use. And so we always want to have like a big picture or a big video, or sometimes you'll have like a day in the life video where, for example, somebody, dies in an accident, and the plaintiff attorney will want to say, let me tell you about this person. Let's interview their relatives. Let's hear people talk about who they are to sort of understand what this person's really like. If you have an opportunity, and we're not quite there today, but we will get there, where you could have the judge or the jury wear an Apple Vision Pro type device
Yeah.
and,
That's
just experience something, whether it's a day in the life, or maybe they're right there at the accident scene so they can see it as it
right.
happened, or maybe they're just understanding the physics, the dynamics of a situation. They will understand it in a way that there's no way you could understand it otherwise. In fact, they're going to understand it so much that opponents that don't have this are going to object to the judge that this is unduly
Yeah.
prejudicial because it's just
Right.
too realistic for them to really understand it. And the response to that is, well, Your Honor, what could be wrong with them having a true understanding of
Right.
what it looks like when you're standing at that street corner,
Immersive.
or what it looks like when you're on that ship, or whatever it is. So,
Nice.
then there's a price issue. I mean, you can't afford right now, unless it's a ridiculously expensive case, to get Apple Vision Pros for all the jury members. But a day is going to come
The
where
day
it's
is
going to be,
coming.
you're going to rent them for a day. You're going to use them to give them to the jury, and it's going to be, and that's just the legal sphere. People and other, I know we've always talked about how doctors use this for telemedicine and stuff like that. So I really
Yeah.
do think that there is something there with the Vision Pro. It's a transformative device. We're getting an early peek into the future today. Anyway, I don't want to
You
go
have
forever
said that
about it,
many
but
times, Jeff. And I got to tell you, I know some people are probably saying, goodness gracious, I'm tired of hearing you guys, talk about the Vision Pro. But until you actually go and experience it, I don't think you could. I will even say, as much as I was on board with it, until I experienced it, Jeff, I don't know that. I really truly understood what it's meaning. So anyway, just all that to say, it's like go to your Apple store, get somebody to sit there with you for 30 minutes and go through the test, or frankly, look up Jeff if you can, because he will do an even better job of doing that. But it was so fun, and I really thank you for that experience on that. Let's do a quick in the show,
In the
just
show.
because we like to talk a little bit about some of the things coming up for the Apple TV Plus. And if you don't have a subscription to Apple TV Plus, one of the first things that you mentioned today, Jeff, on this was that you can do. I guess is Apple trying to get more subscribers? You can get subscriptions now starting at $2.99 for, I guess, for several months, right? For a
I
few
think it's
months,
3
and
months,
then
maybe. Yeah.
yeah, it's something like that, and then it'll go to its full price. But whoo, you could watch a lot in 3 months. Is all I'm
You
saying.
could. You could. And there's
Before
a
you
lot to
cancel it
watch.
on that. And there's a lot of right here is the studio show. We talked about that I think a little bit last week or maybe 2 weeks
Very
ago.
good.
Haven't caught up with all the series and the shows going on, but I know the first two or three were just absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. And then today, as we're recording this, the new John
Yes.
Hamm series called Your Friend's a Neighbor, John Hamm, Olivia Munn, Amanda Peet, and other
Oh,
people.
nice.
And I pulled this, I've been trying to avoid spoilers. I mean, I know a little bit about what's it about. I won't say it in case you don't know it, but it looks like it's really good. I mean, I like John Hamm. I think he's funny. I loved Mad Men and stuff like that. And this reporter, John Powers from NPR, says that it's a perfect role for him. It says that,
Ooh,
he's never been
perfect, even
better.
better than Mad
Um,
Men. I mean, that's
yeah, I mean, he's
amazing.
basically saying it's everything you loved about Don Draper, but it's an even better role and character. So again, I
Okay,
mean, we'll
I'm
see what I
in.
see. I'm
That's
sure I'll
great.
watch it tonight or tomorrow. But that's
Yeah.
that's a great one that's out. There's just so many other ones that are really, really good that are out
You
there.
had a
In
great
fact,
link from Jason Snell. Yeah, is that what you're going
yeah.
to go to? Some of his favorite Apple TV shows and movies on here, which is great.
Yeah, and in fact, on this list, we know that Ted Lasso is coming back for another season. Severance just ended. Slow Horses, I just saw. I didn't
Ugh,
even link to this, but I saw an announcement this week that the next season of Slow Horses comes out. I think this summer, Brett. I know you like that show too.
what?
So that
I
one is coming
do.
soon. But
That's
of course, there's no
great.
surprise there because they filmed two seasons at once, and so we knew that
Right.
they had another season ready to go. And there were some others I forget that are
Oh,
announced
so
that
good. And
the
then one
morning
thing,
show is coming back. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. The morning show, and of course, and I mean, I love Silo. Silo is fantastic
Oh
too.
yeah,
If you
yeah.
like sort of those post-apocalyptic, and speaking of post-apocalyptic, the Murderbot Diaries. Never read these books, but I've been looking forward to maybe some of this. The trailer is out, and it's just absolutely hilarious.
I was
How
going to
did you
ask if
say
you
it
had watched
today?
it.
I did. How did you say it? Like it's a sci-fi workplace comedy.
Yeah, that
It's a
was
genre that you don't see very often, but once you watch the trailer, you'll understand a little bit more.
yeah, I really like the actor Alexander Skarsgård, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. He's been in so many fantastic things, and there's just something about there's his face right there. There's something about him that's
Yeah,
really
yeah.
compelling, and it you can tell from the trailer
So
that I
good.
guess he's playing a robot like a C-3PO from Star Wars type thing, and
Yeah, like an
I can just
android
only
kind of a thing.
imagine that.
Yeah.
His deadpan face, which he's so good at. For example, what was the vampire show that was on HBO? True Blood. When he was that vampire, just that dead face, but was just so good. What do you know from a trailer? Maybe it's just a trailer, but when
Yeah.
I watched that thing
It's
afterwards,
good.
I'm like, I am so ready to watch this one. That one's going to be really, really good.
That is awesome. All
And then I guess the
right.
other one
Well,
I
let's
linked
go
to
to
was the fountain. We'll
yeah.
just say real quick,
What
the
was that? Oh
Fountain of
yeah,
Youth,
the
which looks
fountain. Yeah,
really
that's
fun.
right.
Yeah, it's sort of like a Indiana Jones type thing. It's coming out on May 23rd, and it stars John Krasinski. I mean, talking about The
Oh,
Office.
so good.
I
Yeah.
think it's so funny because I still think of John Krasinski as playing, his character on The Office, where he's
Of
like sort of,
course.
the nerdy guy. And then, of course, he went on to do the Jack Ryan series on, was that Amazon, I
Which
think,
was
Amazon Prime,
excellent.
which
Love
was
that
excellent. And
series.
so to see
Yes.
him as sort of an action star was
Yeah.
it took me a second, and then I'm like, oh, I'm totally into this. And then now it's going to be, it looks like it's a similar type role. It looks like sort of an Indiana Jones-ish type role in this show
I
called
didn't
Fountain
watch this
of Youth.
trailer. Yeah.
So
Oh, that's so
it's good.
good.
It looks like it's going to be fun. He's come a long way from playing Jim in the Pam and Jim. I'll say
I
that.
know,
So
but the
good for
Jack
him.
Ryan series. I mean, if you like sort of that like Jack Reacher type, the
Mm,
spy thing, excellent, excellent series on there. I like that a lot. In the know,
in the
I thought
know.
this week we could just say what is our favorite tip that we had from Tech Show, and I don't even have a link to this because I haven't seen many people talk about this, but I'll tell you, I shared this. So at the end of our ABA Tech Show conference, there's usually a 60 tips in 60 minutes,
Mhm.
which is always fantastic. But so many people share tips throughout the entire show, right, Jeff? I mean, that's what the great thing about just being able to talk to other folks. But one that I did share, and I've had several people ask me about this, is on an iPhone or an iPad, anytime that you can get to a print dialogue. So, for example, if I have an email message and I want to send that email to something else or save it as a PDF file, I can go to the email message and I can say print this email or this conversation. And at the bottom of this print dialog, because at the top it'll say what printer you want to go to and all that kind of stuff. But at the bottom, there's a little print preview image. If you take your thumb and finger and you spread them apart on that little tiny print preview image, it will automatically generate that into a PDF file, whatever it may be. It can be a web page, it can be an email, wherever you have a print dialog. And when you have that PDF generated, then you can use the share box to either email it to somebody or you can upload it to Dropbox or send it out to somewhere. I use this at least 2 or 3 times every week, Jeff, just because
Me
there's
too.
something I want to save or I want to, archive somewhere that I can like put it into PDF Expert or something so I can annotate it, or I want to email it to somebody. I love doing this, and I just tell people about this tip all the time. Anytime you have a print dialogue, open your thumb and finger, spread them apart on the little print preview image. It creates a PDF, and then you can use the share box to share it around.
Great tip. I use it all the time. That's a really good one. So as I was thinking about this, knowing that you were going to share this tip about, doing that pinch to get it to the PDF, it made me think of this one tip that when I did my session on iPads and iPhones at Tech Show, I mean, you talked
Oh,
about
so
60 tips in
good.
60 minutes. I shared about a
You did
thousand
like
tips in 60 minutes.
180, right?
But one of them was, it relates to what you just talked about, and it sort of gets to me because it's been around for so long. I mentioned 2 weeks ago that when I was preparing for that session, I actually went all the way back to November of 2008, one of my very first posts on iPhone JD, which was a list
Amazing.
of tips. And when I posted that list, a lot of people posted comments to it. And there was a comment that was posted by
Oh,
someone who called themselves BG. And
okay.
it's not this one, it's the one before this one, Brett. And his
Oh,
comment
okay.
was,
Gotcha.
I then did a follow-up post that had collected a lot of those comments that people had given me, or the ones that they had showed me. And so his comment to that original post from November of 2008, it still works today. And it was a very simple one. His comment was that when you're doing the pinch, we do this all the time in the Photos app and Safari and the print dialog box. If you're in a situation where you sort of want to adjust it, instead of moving both of your fingers. For me, it's typically my thumb and
Right.
my pointer finger. He says, keep one finger like your thumb in place, and then just move the pointer finger. And that sounds silly to say, but if you try it, like I notice it the most when I'm looking at photos, especially on an iPad, I want to make it bigger, smaller, bigger, smaller. If you keep one finger like your thumb in place, and you just
Right.
move a single finger, you become much more precise in getting it to the precise side. And so this may sound strange, but I encourage you,
Nice.
if you're listening to it, just try this. Try it yourself. Do it the
Okay.
old way that we all do it, and then try it again by keeping your thumb in place and just moving a single finger. And you'll be like, wow, I have like a lot more control over getting it to the exact size. So it's a great tip. But what I love about it is that somebody shared this in 2008. And here we are over 16 years later,
Still
and
work.
it's still a good tip. In fact, it's a better tip today
That's
than it was back
great.
then because there's even more things you can do with the iPhone. We didn't even have an iPad back there. An iPad, an iPhone, all the different ways that you can use this. So I don't know who BG is. Don't know if he or she is listening here, but Mr. B, Mr. G, if I may call you B for short, thank you for the tip because it's still a good one all these years later.
That's fantastic. I love it. I always enjoy hearing from readers and listeners as well. So if you have any questions or want to reach out to us, always feel free to do that. There's ways to contact us on the In the News podcast. Always thanks for listening. And Jeff, thanks again. Great to see you last week, and we'll talk with you next week.
Thanks, Brett. Bye bye, everybody.